Hello, today I want to create a video on the new designer suite of ROES. Since we've been busy merging ROES Pro and ROES Retail together, we've taken the best of Retail Plus, Pager, and the Presenter to create the designer suite, which again is an add-on module to ROES. But before I talk about the features of the new designer suite, we wanted to show you two other core features we've decided to roll into the ROES Core for free, again version 8, and those two features include the ability to assign a mask and a tint at the image level. Now you might think, well, we've always been able to do that within ROES. Now the photographer has the ability to just select your mask and tints within a button underneath the image. We think it's easier for them to discover instead of over on the right hand side where my product options exist, along with your tints, image tones as well. Now they have the ability to select it within a button underneath the image itself. So let's just stop and talk about that for a second. The reason we've decided to throw these two features in for free in version 8 is we think it'll be easier for the photographer to discover, but also easier for you to set up in your lab catalog within ROES. Previously, you had to define a sloppy board or a mask at the product level and pick and choose which products you wanted to have masks show up and which products you wanted the image tones to set up. Now, we're going to give you the ability to define the mask and the tints at one location within your ROES catalog, and then version 8 will sniff that information out and give the photographer the ability to assign all your mask and all your image tones and tints on every image and every node level within ROES. So we just think it's too important to hold back into a add-on module. We wanted to make sure that version 8 had this capability. So we're throwing these two features in for free as labs roll over to version 8. Okay, let's get on to the designer suite. And the best way to show the features of the designer suite is to show two different products, 8x10s, one that's not set up with designer and one that is. As they have the ability to define a text node in a non-designer suite product, you always had the ability to edit the text, but once you edited that text, you had to define a font type and a color within your product options, again over on the right hand side. Most labs would pick the most commonly used 20 or 50 and sometimes 100, which made that product option area quite large, and the same with a font color. So let's look at the same product with designer suite turned on. Now you can see over on the right hand side, because we've eliminated a lot of the need for these options, it's really cleaned that up and hopefully easier for the photographer to discover even more add-ons that they can purchase for that product. We type in the text just like we did before, but now instead of selecting the color over on the lab defined options, we're looking at the system fonts. So instead of 50, now we're including maybe 200 or 300 on top of the type of style. Now instead of giving the ability for the photographer to select from your 50 different colors, let them define with some sliders exactly the color of that text that they want and that makes the most sense for that image. We also have the ability to do fill color, stroke, and drop shadow on a text. But that's not all. Okay, so we're just talking about text. We've just eliminated a lot of different options over on the right. But let's look at the top left, and we have a number of different tools within the designer suite. And for Retail Plus users, you've seen this in the past, we have the ability to rotate, move around existing product nodes and letting the photographer define that on the fly. And that's really one of the most powerful things about the designer. Instead of having the lab define all these different 8x10s with 3 image nodes on it, or 4 image nodes, or a drop shadow here, or a stroke there, instead of trying to guess what your customers want, let them, with the set of tools of the designer suite, define their own product on the fly. And that's what I'm doing here, right? So I have a couple different image nodes. And on this image node, I'm going to rotate it around a little bit. have the ability to rotate all of them if I would like, and then define on this image node different attributes. On this scenario, I'm going to do a drop shadow. You can set it to blur and the X and the Y a little different. You can see it's the drop shadow, blur. And then I'll select on the top, and for this one I'll do a stroke. But you can do a number of different things. You can apply a stroke with different colors. You can apply the mask that I was talking about earlier and define the color of the mask. So not everything just has to be black and white mask. Now we can apply via the Designer Suite a color to that mask. You can define new text nodes just like we can define new image nodes. And you can type in just like we showed earlier, however you want to define that text itself. Now obviously you can tell I'm not a designer by any means, but there's a number of different things within the Designer Suite. We give the photographer the ability to assign things like the opacity, right? So the photographers within ROES, without going to any other application, has designed this template, and now they can save it for every other order later down the road. So they save it local to their local hard drive, and it doesn't go to your lab and you can't distribute it to other photographers. It's core to that photographer. And while they might spend 5 minutes on it, they spend 5 minutes one time. We also have the ability to do montage and snap to grid. Again, like I mentioned, I'm not going to touch on every feature, but the core. Now they've defined that. Now let's just save this to our favorites. And you can see I've defined a number of different designer products, and I can pull that up for later ordering. Okay, for the next feature, in order to show that in the Designer Suite, I'm going to add a few more images to my order, just some 4x6s, and then we'll go to the checkout area. Before the photographer wants to check it out, maybe they want to get a review process. So one of the number one things we got from feedback from our users is the ability to have the presenter render out images. Now we have, as we select the hard drive of the photographer, letting them pick where they want to render these images, we're going to pull up right to the right of the render area a progress bar. So letting the photographer know, hey, ROES is doing something. Because it might take a little bit of time if they're creating a book to render out 100 different images. Now let's look at these images. And because it's a photographer rendering these out, we had some feedback from the lab saying the render feature is fantastic, but it's a little high res. So in order to protect the lab prints, we've defined a watermark, a generic watermark we're going to apply on all images. With the JPEGs at this point, the photographer could upload these to Facebook or any other type of app they want for a review process, or on my Mac, I can just do a simple export and create a PDF. I'm sure there's a number of different applications on the market that can create a PDF if they want to send it out in one file format for review process. So, again, the Designer Suite has the ability to render out for the approval process. It has a number of different image and text node tools, and we think it's a lot more discoverability compared to the old pager feature set. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call and we can follow up more details. Thank you very much.